Hey, what's up, Alliance? We got a generation session in here the other night, and figured I'd give you a little recap of what's going on for your reference and mine as well in the future. So I don't know if you remember where things left off, but Cass has gone to the Darklands, which was supposed to be like a Doctors Without Borders mission, um, researching some pretty devastating disease. But it turns out it's like I guess like the closer equivalency of it is him going to a place thinking it's going to be like Doctors Without Borders, where you're basically in this third world country, but it turns out like Wakanda's hidden down there or something like that. Something to that effect. Anyway, like these people in the Darklands seem to have a very advanced civilization to the point where they're actually ahead of us technologically in a couple of different aspects. um, I had talked to, I think, Tamir about that, and I said, it's like we are the ones who won the war and kind of exiled them, but because of their harsh conditions and because of their lack of natural gifts, it seems like that they've been forced to adapt from a technological perspective more so than we have. It's not to say that we couldn't reach that point, it's just we have enough natural gifts where we haven't, like, what's like, there's a saying about something being like the mother of invention or something like that. I don't know. Whatever it is, there's a something along those lines where their need for stuff pushed forward their technology more so than ours. So at any rate, I'm down here, and with the last session, I finally got the research team set up. We basically got our introductions out of the way, all the uncomfortableness. There's protesters down there because we're basically now this war is like centuries old and everything like that, and I don't think like there's any survivors on either side, but the memory is still very much alive for these people down here. So we're basically viewed as like war criminals almost by the or products of war criminals by the people who the average citizen down here. So like there's a bit of awkwardness, and they have some peaceful protests so far, and I've got these armed guards, like these big Deasley looking dudes, and I always keep making jokes. It's like the one guy's name is Zug. I'm like, Zug, shoot him in the head. I don't say that in character like that, but it's just like, it's like, man, these protesters out here, like, I'm just down here trying to help heal some sick kids, and then they're here protesting me doing it. We get the research center set up. We get 2 or 3 days into the research done. Obviously, like, you're not expecting any major breakthroughs or anything at that point. But we're just basically trying to build a foundation up. We've got like we know very little about this disease, and from the notes that they've taken, it's like we still haven't been able to make any kind of headway on it. So we're trying to create this foundation of like the ecosystem that's down here, potential causes of it, like isolating. I think like the lead researcher from their side thinks it's viral based, and I was like, I'm not sure where their medical technology is. Like it seems pretty advanced, but like I would think that they would be able to isolate that. But then again, I don't know how like the Nui energy that we possess actually works. Like if it might come off looking like it was a virus or a helpful like pathogen of some sort. So I'm a little unclear on that, but we're basically going through some sleepless nights. I've got my 2 research assistants who were basically my underlings at the hospital I used to work at, because I figured I said I had thought about it, and I was like, do I take someone who's more experienced than me? That might have been smart, but they asked for me by name, and that comes into play later. So I was like, I want people who can comfortably work for me and then also help me in the process, because like they're both very capable in their own right, and they each have different expertise that they're good with. So it wasn't like I just like brought some subordinates, but I did bring some subordinates. Like I think they have a good shot at being here, and I didn't know, like I said, I knew very little about what I was going into. Like if I knew specifically like it was a neurologically degenerative disease, I might have sought out someone who specialized in that area, but we didn't have any of that information going in. So like it's one of those ones, like it was more in hindsight, I guess, where I was like, oh, I could have asked someone different to come with me. But given the information I knew at the time, like the people I brought with me are doing fine. Um, we we don't really talk. Like I said, we basically talk shop, and that's about it. Like there wasn't too much going on interpersonally as far as stuff goes. Uh, what happens though is we're basically in the thralls of research, and one of the guys, the dude Miriam, brings me a sandwich for a lunch break, because like you kind of get into it, you forget to eat, you forget to sleep. all that kind of stuff. So I'd make a note to kind of take a little bit better care of ourselves so we're operating at peak efficiency for this kind of thing, as opposed to like burning the candle at both ends and burning ourselves out. And I come to the realization, well, part of it came a little bit earlier when I was recapping my notes and the information I have about Nui energy, or specifically the energy that certain people within my race possess. And it's like, I got to reading on it and it was like, there's some interesting things it can possibly do as far as a diagnostics perspective and as far as a healing perspective. Like, it's not just like you wave your hands at people and heal them. The way it's kind of viewed is you can basically see a person as if they're a tapestry, and there's like these tens of hundreds of thousands of threads, maybe even millions. And Nui energy allows you to like look over the tapestry and see threads that might be damaged, that might be out of place, that might be just not meant to be there. And each one will do something different. Like, let's say, and I'm not saying this is the way it works, but let's say a damaged one just needs to be repaired. That might be like a bodily injury. One that doesn't belong to be there might be like a pathogen or like a foreign substance, a chemical. Whereas like the rearranging of them might be something like a mental state that someone is in. Like they might be depressed, or they might be suffering from some other like mental ailment like dementia or something to that effect. And apparently through Nui energy and the manipulation of this kind of tapestry, it's like, I guess like a tapestry of life is a good way to think about it. Like because like it's also like interconnected between the person and the world around them, and like there's like interpersonal connections sometimes too, and supposedly at the higher levels I can start to manipulate those as well. So I was like, Cass is like, I think I kind of downplayed a lot what Cass's potential is, and it's like I read this and it must not have stuck with me at the time, because I freaking read the sheet on Nui energy 2 or 3 times at least the first time I got it, and I probably read it like four more times since then. But this time I was like, I just kind of like started to dive into the possibilities with it, and I was like, oh, like this stuff actually could be really, really potent from like a personal manipulation standpoint. Whether you're like healing depression through just like a rearranging of these threads that you basically fix a person from it, or that like long-standing trauma can be potentially repaired, or in not a case so much for Cass because he's a doctor and a healer, is like you could basically inflict trauma or perceive trauma on someone through messing with this tapestry. So like there's a lot of scary potential there for use and misuse, equal parts of it. And that's just the Nui side. Like there's a side called Quare as well, and Quare is like I think historically it's believed that like they're two sides of the same coin, kind of like a light side and dark side kind of thing. It's like it's still the Force. It's still at its core like Nui energy, the people of the Nui Tari people, but it's just like one is born out of malice and decay, whereas the other is built out of longevity and restoration. I don't know if one can possess both, but who knows. So yeah, anyway, long story short to this, because this was a short session, it was funny, but here I am rambling. George, as well as my character, had kind of come to the conclusion, or not a conclusion, but like a hypothesis that there's something more going on here than just a viral infection that these people can't cure, because they have extensive medical records, they have a very advanced technology, and they ask for me by name, and I'm not internationally famous as far as like doctors and healing go. Like I probably made like some like quarterly like journals of medicine kind of things for like breakthroughs and stuff, but it's not like I'm not like the Dr. House of my world or anything like that. At least I don't think so yet, because one, I'm very young. Like I'm only like 23, 24 years old, but I'm also very gifted. But yeah, like there's people who are like, I'm not the highest grade in even my own hospital or anything like that. Like there's different grades that you're basically rated on based on your experience and your abilities and your talents. And I was like, I'm not even the highest grade by a long shot. So I'm up there. I'm very high for my age, but I'm not like at the pinnacle of what someone would do for this. So like immediately I'm curious as to, and Cass is curious as well, like why me, and why bring me down here of all people. The other thing that really kind of struck me is the system, or like the structure of the disease or how it was affecting people. Specifically, there's 12 regions. Like I think they're called like the 12 chisels. Like they're like 12 houses, and each one like is a different house. Like there's an house for like industrial stuff. There's a science and medicine house. That's how their society's broken down. So there are two victims, all of them children, from each of these houses. And while it's not one male, one female from each of those houses, there's an equal split of six males, six females. And Cass got to thinking, it's like, if I were to be an unethical, researching, monstrous type person, like what would I do as far as testing like the potential or the limits of like this foreign or yet newly discovered energy that he's going to assume is Quarry for the moment. It's like, well, you want to look for someone who's more susceptible to it. So at that point, you would probably go with children and elderly. But you want to rule out elderly because they probably have a lot more pre-existing issues that are out there. So children, and then we have children that are afflicted. We want like in our test subject, we want an equal split between male and female, just to, see if there's any kind of effect there, if gender plays any kind of role in like susceptibility or progression of symptoms or anything like that. And then we want an equal split for who's out there, where they're from. Like is there like an area that's exposed to a lot of more industrial side of things that's more susceptible, like a weakened immune system? Is like people from like a more affluent or a more like professional type area, are they more resistant? Like things like that, like different factors you want to look at. So basically you're running a very limited test and you have a limited number of test subjects, but you want to give yourself a broad enough spectrum where you can kind of do like a first draft of it. Like you're not looking at the intricacies of each effect, but you want enough of a spread so you can do that. And it's like there's too many coincidences, like two from each house, equal numbers of each gender, all of them children, all of them within like a very specific age range. Like the kid I'm about to look at is only 4 years old. And yeah, so it's like that's what that kind of gets cast on some conspiracy stuff. It's like maybe this isn't a virus, like maybe it's an experiment of some sort. And even if it is a virus, it can still be done from an experimental perspective. Like you're basically introducing it to a very small number of the population and examining its effects. So I go over this with my research team, and we start breaking down. There was something I had read in one of my older books where it's like people who possess Quarry energy oftentimes have very dark circles under their eyes and sometimes black spots. So it's like that also goes along with sleep deprivation to a point, but we were using it as a jumping point because we were able to isolate where the first documented cases. And this population has a very strict regimented checkup period where basically you're not absolutely required, but you're borderline like it's almost borderline requirement to have like regular medical checkups, so you can basically get these vitamin shots because they live underground, and like it's just they kind of like to watch after their citizens. So there's a very extensive, very detailed medical record of a lot of people. So what we were able to do is we were able to take the time period of the first one that showed up, and then we found out there was two earlier cases. So we basically the progression of symptoms from stage 1 to stage 2 is 20 to 40 days across the people that we know. Going back, we basically took it back to so it was 407 days ago, and then we basically looked at the first documented cases and then the undocumented cases that came out that were stage 2 and extrapolated from there like 430 to 450 days ago. We then went back like a short time before that, say like from 450 to like 490 days ago or something along those lines, and looked through the medical records of people who showed the signs of sleep deprivation. From that, we got about 300 hits. We basically used one of their research assistants to go through the records and do that, and then we narrowed it down for specific symptoms of sleep deprivation, mention or at least specific mentions of like dark circles under their eyes and black spots specifically, because circles are one thing, like people tend to get that, but like the black spots I feel like will be a little bit more pronounced. I think we're down to 100 names at that point. And like I said, like this, I don't know how big the population here is or anything like that, but the big thing that kind of narrowed it down, maybe it wasn't that, maybe it was like 300 there. The big thing that narrowed it down was there was two other factors that we kind of came up with, And the one was, let's look at it from the perspective of someone who has a background in research, whether it's science, medicine, or like corporate, like anyone who understands how to, or who would understand intimately the process of the best way to get like a good sample size of what's going on like across different spectrums. So we basically narrowed it down further from there, and then we also kind of cross-referenced that with people who had specifically, if there was any kind of hits where they specifically dealt with very, what do I want to say, like very dangerous or very severe diseases, because the disease is very severe. Like it starts out with, where is it here? So the symptoms are, you start out with slurred speech, which isn't too bad. You know, it's like, it suggests that it might be like a mental degenerative thing. Then you get muscle deterioration. Then you get tumor-like growth all over the brain. And then there's a very rapid aging process at the end, where at that point, people who, like most of the people who have exhibited the signs of this have been put into like a medical stasis to kind of try to stop or slow the progress. But the people who are late stage, basically their body is withering away at that point. And that kind of, to me, sounds a little bit like Quarry energy and what it does. Like late stage, if it's not treated, like it's definitely fatal like that, where it's just like a complete shutdown of all your bodily systems, which I'm assuming might manifest itself as a kind of like a rapid aging thing, where it's like all the system is your body, you're basically aging like you're much older, and the fact that they're children, makes it all the much worse. So that is how we kind of narrow it down, and that was a lot of the session was kind of hashing through that and kind of exploring the possibility of it. Now, the problem is, it makes Cass sound like a bit of a conspiracy theorist, where it's like, all right, you called me down here, and it's actually like some mastermind, like, performing this horrendous test with this energy that's largely considered almost mystical to these people. Like, to us, to the new Itari, like, it's very, like, people have not been able to concretely prove with science that Nui energy exists, but they're able to see the results of it. So it's like, whatever spectrum it exists on, we'll call it like visual or metaphysical or anything like that, we don't have the technology to see it in action, but we can see the results. So it's like, it's hard to deny that in some way it does exist, because our entire population, at least not the non-Darklands, many of them have some sort of gift with it, and then there's only a select few that kind of pursue that gift to a high level, specifically usually with medicine. And they kind of like cultivate that gift. So yeah, it's like I said, it's like six of one, half another. It's like, it's metaphysical and ephemeral and difficult to grasp, but the results are tangible. So it's like, something is there beyond the realm. It's kind of like almost like a magic perspective. It's like, you can see the results, but you don't understand the process. So Cass sounds a little bit like a conspiracy theorist like this, but he keeps this internally for the most part. But then I kind of get the realization, like, oh, they're 100% reporting this up the line, because the president's son is one of the people that's afflicted with this stuff. So I go to the lead researcher who has overseen it so far, and the only reason I go to them is because they are my best connection to someone who, like I said, I can't call anyone here trustworthy yet, but like, I've had the most interaction with them. And the reason I go to them is I need to find out what exactly they're relaying up the line, because if this is someone doing this, it's very possible they exist within the medical field. And specifically, one of my researchers pointed out that there are certain omissions in the tests and in the data from the patients. So it's like, are they being redacted by the government to like kind of cover something up, or is the person who is performing these tests somehow associated with the field of medicine that they're doing this experimentation? So it's like, George basically weighed the risk, and it's like, I took a gamble. I said, all right, I'm going to kind of show my cards to this Dr. Amara here and let her do with it what she will. So she's taking me to the place, the very specific research setting that she has set up, so I can interact with one of the children who are put in stasis, so I can basically work my Nui magic on them and see if I can figure out what's affecting them. But on the way there, I basically have this conversation where it's like, I need to know how much information is going up the line, And she basically says like, oh yeah, like anything you guys research or anything like that, it's brought up the line and like that. I was like, well, okay, are you guys monitoring our specific conversation? And she says no. And I was like, okay, I'm taking her to her word. Like, it's very possible she's lying and they have us monitored. And I said, okay, I'm going to tell you why I'm telling you this is I have a theory. It's not my front running theory, but it is a theory that I'm going to explore nonetheless. And I basically break down the idea that this looks like, whether it's viral or Nui and Quarry based or something like that, that it may be an experiment that someone's running on a portion of your population. And I don't know to what ends it is at this point, but there's too many coincidences that occur within like the sample size and the location of, and like it's like it doesn't like follow the path of a viral outbreak. And like I said, it doesn't also follow the path of a genetic disorder, because we've looked back at the backgrounds and we're looking for ties that would tie these people together. Like, are they interact in certain environments together? Do they share certain bloodlines? No, like none of that. Like we've gone through and hashed out all that stuff. Now I'm assuming they did as well, but we kind of like double checked it for them. So it's like at this point, it's starting to become a forefront theory, but like it's not like concrete enough. It's a hypothesis at this point. So I basically break this down to her and I say there's a possibility that someone here might be doing that, and if they were to be made aware that this is our line of thinking, they might wish to end the experiment that they're doing, specifically ending the lives of children. So I tell you this with caution, where you can report what you want up the line, but this is one of the lines of thinking we're going with. And it's not the only one, but it is one, and there is some merit to it, especially with what we know and understand, and what you guys specifically don't understand, which is Nui and Quarry energy. Like, that's the thing with the Darklands, is they don't possess anything like that. So to them, it's completely foreign, whereas to us, it's just more ephemeral. Yeah, so she gets taken back by this and insulted, and I'm like, well, wait, you're insulted? Like, I'm not accusing you of doing it or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, there's a possibility that someone out there is doing this. And she's like, no, we wouldn't do that kind of thing down here. And I'm like, okay, like, do you not possess? And like, I had to check with the DM. I was like, society still exists the same way, where it's like, even in more ideal situations, sometimes people's ambitions will outweigh their station in life, which leads to discontent, right? Right, fair enough. So I was kind of taken, Cass was kind of taken back by this, is like that she suggested in a very specific way that they wouldn't have anyone down here who would do this kind of thing. Which, I'm just like, oh, like, really? You don't have any criminal element in your society? Like, no one's discontent with their station? Like, no one? Nothing? And I didn't push the issue because I'm here on, like, a diplomatic mission as well. But Cass at least rationalized it as they want to seem better than us because they are the result of misfortune and mistreatment from us. So it's like, if they show, like, oh, like, their society has problems just the same as ours, then it's like, it's probably a personal point of pride, and it's like kind of stinging that if they have to admit like that they do have shortcomings like that. So that's how he kind of brushed that aside. Like, now he didn't verbalize that to her, but he did it internally, and he's like, I want to apologize. Like, I'm exploring hypotheses here. I know nothing about your culture. I know nothing about the environment down here. Like, I'm just trying to find the best way to seek a cure to basically to fix these kids up so they can return to their lives. And it's like, there's nothing personal involved with it, and she kind of let it at that. But like, the big thing is like, I had to put it out there, because if they're spying on all our information or anything like that, then it doesn't matter anyway. But if they are, then we can kind of control the flow of information, where I'm like, listen, use your best discretion. I understand you have to report up to your superiors, but the more people that hear about this, the more chance that if it is what is happening here, that the person responsible for it will hear about it. And that comes with like some downsides to it. So I was like, take that for what you will. She shows me the medical lab she has set up for me. I basically do a quick, not a quick once over. I do a once over to make sure it's like what I need as far as things go. And she has the schedule. She has like them scheduled to bring in one of the sick children to me. His name is like Laku, I think it was. He's like 4 years old. He's one of the first three showing symptoms, but he never got to last stage. I think he's in stage 3, which is like the brain tumors and lesions, but he is in like in a stasis state to keep him from that. Um, excuse me. While she's doing that, she's like, it's going to take about 2 hours to get like everything moved and everything like that. So I grab a quick nap and then get myself up, get showered, get ready to go, uh, and then make my way back down to the lab. I also ask that she stays there because I feel bad because like Cass is kind of like full conspiracy theory mode because like I said, there's a lot of circumstances surrounding this, why he was asked for specifically, how he was attacked by a terrorist organization in his own country because because he was basically recruited by the government to come here, the government's interaction with it, and then like all the misinformation that he received from his government about the way the Darklands is, like the thing I mentioned earlier, like a Doctors Without Borders to like a third world country to like basically showing up as what is essentially a Wakanda type situation where they are far ahead of us as far as like technology and society and all this other stuff. So he's a little bit paranoid right now because he was also kidnapped and beat up by this terrorist organization before he came here. So yeah, the paranoia works for. Like I said, I don't feel like it's too far out of his character at this point. And also, I'm very suspicious as well. But yeah, so the next thing of suspicion I take is I was like, I need you here, and I say this to Dr. Romero. I was like, I need you here to oversee everything that I'm doing, and I'm going to walk you through it to the best of my ability, and you can monitor it to the best of your ability. But like, I don't need people thinking that I killed this kid if something goes wrong, because that was something she mentioned earlier was like she thought I was going to straight up experiment on this kid. And I'm like, no, like this is just diagnosis and observation. Like she thought I was going to go in there and start cutting and start fixing, like, like using this kid as an experiment so I could work on the others. It's like, whoa. And it's like that, given the horror stories I'm sure they heard about my people, like it doesn't seem out of character, especially for someone like Cass who is very clinical and not always the most empathetic person. To bet, like, it's like, well, like we've got 11 other test subjects. If this one dies, then it's for forwarding the cause. It's like, no, Cass isn't about that. Like Cass is a decent person and someone who would never try to put someone's life at risk like that. So in my mind, like I ask her there so she can kind of oversee that if something happens, that her and I do everything possible to save the kid, especially if the person is able to, if there is a person masterminding this, if they're allowed to have outside influence, like if they were to choose to like try to end the kid's life while I'm there and then making us look even worse than we already do, kind of sparking a bit more outrage. So Cass is trying to like Sherlock it up a bit, like, and see 3 or 4 steps ahead of wherever this could potentially be as far as a worst case scenario. Best case scenario, this is just a virus that it affects a very select few amount of people and it's something that needs to be fixed and repaired. Worst case scenario, like there's someone actually doing this and they're calculating about how exactly they're going through it and they have like this malevolent plan in play. So it's like, from best to worst, he's trying to prepare himself for the worst case scenario, especially given that the government put the pressure on him. It's like, this is a huge diplomatic opportunity to kind of restore some ties between our two nations and like kind of bridge the gap that's there. It's like, if there was a terrorist organization on his side, on Cass's side, that wanted this broken up, I'm sure there's going to be people here, despite like the Amara's suggestion that that this is like almost like a utopian type society and people don't experience discontent with their lives and their jobs or anything. But yeah, I think I ended there. I had started the scan and I think the DM said something I've never seen before and he paused me and I tried to stop the pause, but the DM was like, no, you're on pause. And that's where we ended off. All right.